Here, if
Hello,
I can find
everybody,
it.
and welcome. Today, I got with me the Faithless Southerner. Also, I should say, I got Evans with me, also known as the Faithless Southerner. um, I'm going to interview him today. Oh, I did it again, Evans. You, Jesus, you'd think told you, La La Land. But we're gonna talk about his upcoming ideas for his YouTube channel, and hopefully we see that coming soon because that ought to be good. I think Evans will put out some great videos, and so for now, I guess, would you like to introduce yourself, Evans?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Evans Murphy, or otherwise known as the Faithless Southerner. I'm not quite sure why I have that name because I typically go by my real name. Um, been a part of the community here for a few months now. Very shortly, I'll have, hopefully this weekend, maybe next weekend, I'll have some content on my YouTube channel. So uh, it's basically
Oh,
who
cool.
I am and where I'm
I,
at.
I'm gonna I'm gonna get back to that, but let's start with the basics. Did you grow up in a religious household?
Yes, very.
Okay,
Um,
and what denomination was it?
so we, let's see, it's kind of a weird road. So originally we were Mennonite, but a very liberal version of the Mennonites. So
Hmm.
it was more in line with what you kind of classically say as a Southern Baptist, a little more conservative than a Southern Baptist. That's whenever I was real young, and then we made the swap to Pentecostal, Church of God, very Pentecostal, um, for probably about 7-8 years until my middle teenage years, and then from there I was a Southern Baptist, so I kind of got to see various denominations.
Yeah, the only similarity between the denomination, you've always been in the hardcore denomination, so it sounds
Yes,
like,
very fundamental.
but you are from the deep south though, so that's pretty common then, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's pretty run of the mill for down
So,
here.
so what was? Can you think of any one thing, or do you know when when you started to turn your back on religion and focus more on atheism? I mean, did you have a period of confusion where you were like you didn't want to come out and say, okay, I'll just let you explain it, but like
Yeah,
when did you start? When did you first realize there was something wrong?
so I guess whenever in my middle teenage years, I started doing martial arts. And so I ran into people who were in Eastern or sort of New Age religions. And that was the first time I was, I don't know, maybe 14, 15, something around there. That was the first time that I ran into people who weren't Christian, in my entire life. I ran into people who weren't Christian. And that was originally because it kind of like within the faith, there was a notion that people who weren't Christian were in some way, shape, or form kind of maybe not evil, but misguided and things like that. So I met people who were just generally good everyday people who happened to follow some sort of form of Buddhism. And so that was
Hmm.
kind of the first chink that really I won't say that catalyzed, but that was definitely the first time where I started thinking like, huh, these people are good people. They're moral. They're upright. They're friends, and I like them a bunch. And they hold different beliefs than me, but they're respectful and things like that. And then whenever I was 16, I went on a missions trip, and that was, I guess, what you could say would be the turning point, because we went to a largely Muslim country and not radicalized. It was Kosovo, and even prior before they were a country. And we did a missionary stint
Right.
there. And the majority of the people there are Muslims, but they're kind of culturally Muslim, I guess, if that makes sense. So, like, the women don't wear burqas, and they pray every day and they read the Quran and things like that. But it's kind of like cultural Christians here in the States. And while I was over there,
Right.
attempting to preach to these people, um, and we were doing other things as well. It wasn't just a missions trip. We were doing aid and things like that. And but then that's whenever it really started to catalyze. Like, I worship a God who's going to send these people to hell. These are good people, everyday people. They've had hardship and struggle that I could never imagine, and their faith brings them some sort of modicum of comfort and things like that. And here I am telling them that, well, you're actually following the wrong version of the Abrahamic God. And so if you don't follow my
Right.
version of it, then you're going to go to hell. And so that was really like the first turning point uh, in my deconversion experience. And it was still many years after that before I catalyzed over into full atheism. But that was
So
by the time.
that planted the seed, so to
Say what?
speak.
Yeah.
That planted the seed, though, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, it started me. I went from not questioning anything to going, well, perhaps the version of God that I believe in is not the version of God that I thought that it was, because here I am worshiping a being that I was taught was omnibenevolent, but he's going to send uh, people that I know as friends now that have endured terrible hardships to hell for eternity because they believe in a different prophet than I do, essentially, and at that point in time, I was still a Christian, but, I kind of slid from sort of hardcore conservative fundamentalist Christian into more like an easy believism.
Right.
Like, Jesus is the way, but other people can get into heaven, and things like that. And then it kind of unraveled from there over a little period of many years.
And so now, when you went to Kosovo, was it still? I mean, obviously, you went there after the fall of communism. So, was it still Yugoslavia, or had they broken up into like the different countries at that time?
So it was about a year before, if I'm remembering correctly, it was about a year before they actually became their own country. So there was still a heavy Yugoslavian influence
Uh-huh.
and Serbian presence there. But and it wasn't terribly dangerous, but it wasn't a safe place either. There were
Right.
troops stationed there, and there were people walking around with guns, and you were told not to go over certain bridges and things like that. So, and I think it was about a year after we got out of there, if my memory serves me correctly, whenever they became independent and became a country of their own.
Okay. Okay. And how long were you on this mission? Was it like a year-long mission or?
No, it was I think 35 days in total.
Oh,
So
okay.
it wasn't a weekend stint, but it wasn't like a super long ordeal either. So it was enough time to get acclimated and get to know people. Um,
Did you learn any of the language while you were there?
I picked up a reasonable amount, enough that I could, say good morning, good night, and how are you doing, and kind of what's up and things like that. But not most of the people that we interacted with were relatively fluent in English, enough that you could, between my poor understanding of their language and their somewhat better understanding of ours, we could communicate relatively well.
Okay. And at that time, were they still all speaking Russian since that was a Soviet bloc country, or did they speak different languages?
They spoke like a version of Albanian, if I'm remembering correctly, called Ship. It was kind of like I guess an Americanized, like what you would think of an Americanized version of the King's English. It was there like a Kosovar version of Albanian in the area that
Okay.
we were in.
So is Albanian similar to Russian sounding though? I mean, does it have that? Is it Slavic? Does it have that same feel to it?
Yeah, as far as I know. I mean, I'm not a an expert on Russian, but it's still
Okay.
yeah, it has, you could definitely say it's got sort of Slavic influences to it.
Hmm, okay.
At
And
least as
so
far as I remember. That's been a while ago.
are your folks still atheists or atheists? Are your folks still religious?
Um yes. They're
Yes, they are.
they're more relaxed than they used to be, but they're still very very much theists. And I went on the missions trip with some extended family, and which they're still very very religious. Um, but as far as my parents go, I'm upbringing, they're more relaxed than they used to be, but still what I would consider theists.
That's cool. And so has did atheism cause a rift between you and your parents at all? I mean, did it have any negative consequences when you finally came out?
Um, to some degree, it was there were several family members that were more hurt or saddened
Hmm.
by it, I guess you would say. Um, and then there was some hostility as well. But for the most part, and it's kind of because I was very once my religious beliefs started to kind of break down a little bit, I came out, to my family as not fundamentalist Christian anymore. Essentially,
Hmm.
like I don't believe a lot of the BS that you're pushing here. That an all loving God's going to send everybody to hell that doesn't believe in His special Son and things like that. And so there was already some breakdown that went on there. But to
Uh-huh.
be a full blown atheist, there was some negative kickback, but in a lot of sadness, I guess would be the way a
Right,
better, more apt way to
but,
describe it.
they didn't shun you or anything like that, right?
No, we just don't talk about religion. Is basically what it
Yeah,
boils down
yeah.
to.
That's kind of how like me and some of my certain like not my immediate family, but my like extended like aunts and uncles, cousins, stuff like that. That's kind of how I have to approach the same thing. I just they know I'm not a Christian, but I don't bring it up. I don't rub salt and I don't rub it in their face, so to speak.
Well, it's something that, like, for a lot of my family, it's like we were very fundamentalist. We were very involved in church. And I was as well. Like, there's I get offended with the "you're not a real Christian" argument, uh, because I played in praise and worship band, and I've preached sermons before, and I've been baptized in the Holy Spirit, and done the song and dance, and believed it fully for many years of my life. And at one point in time, I thought that I was called to be a minister, and uh, so there were, but a lot of my family's just kind of culturally Christian. Like, it's not something that we think about or talk about a whole lot. And so there has been attempts to bring it up and to
Hmm.
attempt to convert and things like that. But like, I've spent the better part of 10 years really brooding on these questions. And that's not the same effort that most people put into it. And so whenever you come, with with your typical kind of apologetics, like weak ass apologetics argument, like that's
Hmm.
stuff that I considered years ago and found wanting. So for the most part, we just don't talk about it. Uh, it's one of those things we don't talk about politics and religion. So which is
That's
bad because
that's
those are things that we need to be talking about.
I mean that you're right. You're right. Politics, religion are things that need talked about, but you definitely need to put. Do you believe that you need to pick the perfect time for that
Yeah,
battle, so to speak?
yeah,
I
absolutely.
I think sometimes people pick the wrong. They're so wrapped up in their beliefs that they'll bring it up at any time, and that ruins things for a lot of people in a lot of places because people want to choose the wrong place to do battle, so to speak. Like
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't see, I don't see you going over there on Christmas Day and hanging out with your mom and dad and opening presents and being like, "Oh, fuck your Jesus ain't real,"
Yeah.
blah blah blah, that kind of thing. I mean, that's just that's neither the time nor the place to do it. You know.
Well, I relate it
Um,
to the people that overshare about religion. Like, how annoying is it to go somewhere and you're trying to get your tag at the DMV and there's some guy passing out New Testaments. Like, this isn't like, there are times and places for these discussions, and there are people who want to be involved in the discussions. And for those, I'm fine. And I wish that more people wanted to be involved in the discussion, because I think that it's fruitful and it's conversations that we need to be having. But at the same time, it's, I'm not just going to ambush some random person on the street and go, well, God's not real and here's why, or show up at Christmas with a, fuck Jesus shirt on. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm fairly much the same way. Like, everybody knows I'm an atheist. I do. There are some people that want to argue with me constantly, but not, for the most part, most people leave me alone, But they always do say that, oh, you believe in God, you're just mad at him. And I hate that, God. I hate when people say that.
I hate, that's one of the worst arguments. And it comes up so often. One, because any atheist, if you're an atheist out there and you're watching this and you're an atheist because you're mad at God, you're not an atheist, period.
Right. What's that? A mesophist or mesiophist or
whatever you want to classify it as. It's one of those things that, like, the catalyst for my atheism was starting to doubt the validity of the God that I believed in. So that would be the first, let's say, the first step away from theism.
Right. That was the first hurdle.
Yeah, it took me like 10 years to go from Christianity to sort of easy believism Christianity to some sort of vague pantheism to deism, finally into atheism. And, like, that's fine. That's a perfect. And if you're somewhere on that road to, one place or other, as long as it's convincing to you and it lines up with your experiences and things like that, that's perfectly great. But at the same time, it shows such a lack of understanding of what atheist and atheism, deism, theism, these words mean. Whenever you're told, hey, you're not actually an atheist, you're just mad at God. It's like, I can't be mad at something that I don't believe in, that doesn't exist for me. I'm not mad at unicorns,
Right.
So, and I'm not mad at leprechauns and things like that. So, and then even beyond that, the sort of theistic, well, there's a God, you just don't believe in him. Like, study some freaking epistemology, because that doesn't happen. You can't know something that you don't believe in. It's just basic facts.
Exactly. Now, would you say do you think there are any negative points about atheism? Do you think there are any negative parts of atheism?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I don't toe the atheist rhetoric line probably as well as I should be to be a popular sort of anti-theistic atheist. I think there is a proclivity towards nihilism with atheism. I think there's a proclivity for people to lose a sense of meaning with whenever they become atheists, especially if you've been a theist. I think that there's there's definitely hurdles with atheism that are tough, or at least, and this is speaking from my own experience, that were tough for me to overcome, such as questions of meaning and purpose and things like that. So what?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, so
no, go ahead.
Yeah. So there was definitely, there's definitely negative aspects to it, which has nothing to do with the truth claims behind the beliefs or the fact that there are negatives to atheism is not an argument for theism.
No.
I view it as more of a challenge to the atheist community to properly address these issues, especially for people who are struggling. So,
right, right, right.
it's definitely there are positives and there are negatives, just like any belief,
Right, right. So what are on the flip side of that? What do you think are some of the positive things about atheism that um that are to help combat religion? What do you think are some of the positive parts of it?
So for me, and this is weird because this is a side effect that I didn't expect to happen. My death anxiety is gone. Like death is something that I was afraid of for the majority of my life. Basically, as soon as I figured out that I would one day perish, even whenever I was convinced that I was going to go to heaven, right? Death was still something that I didn't look forward to because I remember, and the Pentecostals are very much they're about the end times.
Oh,
At least the
you don't
church
have
that I was in.
I know that.
And
I
so I
know that.
remember there was a pastor who was eloquent and well spoken and well learned and things like that. And he was preaching that the end times, this was back in probably 2011, 2012, things like that. And even as a young kid, I paid a lot of attention. Like I say, this was something I was into. And I remember him preaching a series of on Revelations, and that it was that Jesus was coming back, and it was freaking soon. Like it was going to happen. He had the date and the times and things like that. Like it was going to happen in a couple of years. And I remember then being part of me was hopeful, like, hey, I get to live in paradise with Jesus forever. This is awesome. But then part of me was like, if Jesus comes back whenever I'm say 14, whenever he's predicting this, like I'm never going to have a family. I'm never going to know what it's like to have a wife or kids or know what it's like to grow old or have grandkids or succeed in a career or really get good at a hobby and things like that. And so like I remember as a kid praying and it's ludicrous, but that Jesus didn't come back until I was able to experience life fully. And so even whenever I was a theist, convinced I was going to heaven, there was part of me that was really anxious about dying early, not being able to experience life and going to heaven without properly living, so to speak. And this is while I was absolutely 100% convinced that I was going to heaven. Like there was never a question that there wasn't an afterlife. And so one of the weirdest side effects for me is basically whenever I came to the conclusion there was no God, and slightly off topic to atheism, but something that goes along with it, fairly tight, that there is no soul, there is no afterlife. This is the only life that you get, and whenever you croak, you're done. You go from the same state of existence that you were from the inception of the universe. I don't remember anything before I was born or until I was about 3 or 4 years old. And so once I'm done, I'm done. And like, what's there to fear about non-existence? Like I want to take care of my family in case I, do things. But once you get those safeguards kind of set up, like, it would be a shame if I croaked tomorrow. But
Right.
if I got in a car wreck, what's there to fear? I'm not going to know. My family's taken care of. So, there's that was one of the more positive things. And ironically, it was the same way for my wife, who had crippling death anxiety and existential, things like that. So that was one of the best things that came out of it. And I think it's nice to be clear in your beliefs, whenever I was a sort of a deist or a pantheist or things like that, it was always, well, what if I'm wrong? And now that I'm basically convinced that there is no God, at least I've got clarity in my belief system and clarity in what I need to do next, And so, and I think that there's a fantastic community within the atheists that rivals that of the church, welcomed with open arms. And I think that to some degree, it's answering questions, with, at least for me, because I'm a hard atheist, it finally puts to rest questions like divine purpose and meaning and things like that. Like I may not be satisfied with the answer. Like I may wish that magic existed, but at least I know it doesn't now. And so that's one of the biggest positives for it for me, and I think that, the is more of a global thing. I think that the secularism and the humanism that the atheist community generally pushes is hands down the best way to organize a society, for theists and for atheists. So I think that's a really good thing, because you're not advocating for a theocracy.
Right.
Humanism's good for everybody.
Right. Do you think that that there are any atheists that do more damage to our cause than they do good?
Absolutely. And this is,
Yeah.
again, this is where I'll be unpopular. I think the asshole sort of radicalized atheist types, the ones that claim things like all religious people are stupid, or whenever I became an atheist, my brain finally activated, or the people that claim, that religion is a mental disorder and things like that. Like, you're doing far more harm to perpetuating the problem that I have with the atheist community in general. And this is a small subset of the atheist community,
Right.
but is that we hold ourselves up to be pillars of logic and reason and knowledge and research and, citations and papers and all these things. But then we turn right around and say things like, I don't care about philosophy, and I merely lack a belief in deities, and you can't prove a negative. And, religion is a mental disorder, and all theists are liars. And, we perpetuate these absolutely ridiculous and in some cases just downright insulting bits of rhetoric that are just vomited up. And nobody's going to be convinced of an argument. I know I sure wouldn't be. And maybe there's going to be somebody in the chat that's like, no, I was convinced. Somebody called me a shithead and an idiot, and suddenly I saw the light. But if you go around saying that theists are dumb, they have mental disorders, they're nothing but lying sacks of crap, things like that, like, you're not helping anybody.
No, and not
It's
only
the
that, but
same.
you're being disingenuous
Yeah,
yourself.
it's the same exact sentiment that you get from the people like Helano Henzo and these sort of vitriolic, hateful theists. It's the same damn thing as somebody coming up to you and saying, you're going to burn in hell forever because you don't believe in my special God. Like, if you say theists have a mental disorder, you're in the same boat as the young earth creationists and the flat earthers. And, if you're perpetuating those just terrible lines of argumentation, and it's prevalent, it's a subset of our community, but I see it way more. And what makes it more egregious in my mind is the fact that we hold ourselves to be somehow more enlightened or more in touch with what's true or knowledgeable. It's the same thing that we fight against with theists whenever we say things like, oh, well, you think that the creator of the universe has a special relationship with you and he gave you this special knowledge. Like, one of the most controversial Twitter posts I made was like that. I said that the angry, yelling atheists are just as bad as their theistic counterparts. And like, that got mobbed by atheists that were like, well, yeah, but I've never enslaved anybody. And nor is any freaking theist that you're talking to on Twitter. Get real, know?
Right.
It has nothing to do with what the church has done or what atheists are done or things like that. But even calling out that sort of, I like the sentiment that I don't like philosophy and things like that just blows me away. Whenever somebody says I don't like philosophy, but I'm logical, like, get out of here. You haven't even glanced at it, and you want to act like you know something about it. Like, logic is a branch of philosophy. So that's one of my just a pet peeve of mine, because if we hold ourselves up as pillars of logic and reason and truth, and we want to bring people into our community, we have to be better.
Right.
Across the board, we have to be better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't just we can't use the same tactics as the theists are using, and not only is it like disingenuous, but it's intellectually dishonest.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make this about me, but I was just going to use it as a pointer. Like my ex girlfriend's an ex Pentecostal, or not? She's not ex Pentecostal, I should say. My ex girlfriend's Pentecostal, and you know what? She's a Pentecostal. Her father's Pentecostal, but I would still to this day defend her father to anybody that has a bad word to say about that man, because I wish I could fill that man's shoes. Yes, he believes in God, but he's a very loving father, grandfather. He's a great part of the community. The guy's got the biggest heart in the world. He would do anything for anybody. He's a Pentecostal pastor, but I don't agree with his ideas. But now, does that make him a bad person? Not at all. I wish I could be that man. I mean, he's a great man, and I think it's unfair to say someone's they're stupid, or you're an idiot because you believe in God. I was like that when I was younger, but that really opened my eyes up spending that 5 years with Heather. That, like, yeah, I still think your religion's silly, but if all Christians were like them, then I wouldn't have a bit of a problem with Christians, to be honest with you. If they
Yeah.
all upheld what the Bible says for them to uphold, then I wouldn't have even a little bit of one problem with Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of my best friends are theists, and they're very committed, very knowledgeable people. They're way smarter than myself. And we
Right.
have great discussions about religion and politics and policy and things like that. But at the end of the day, I'd feel much better calling them if I had a flat on the side of the road and needed help, because I know they'd jump in the car just like
Right.
they feel about me. It's like,
Right.
atheism and theism are not where people begin nor end. It's a question. It's an answer to a singular question. And while
Yes.
theism is more encompassing in a worldview, it's not the end all be all for who a person is. And if
Exactly.
somebody else has a different standard by which they judge uh, what they judge to be true about reality, and if they've come to different conclusions than myself, then it's just something we disagree on. You know, and for the most part, like, if you're, because the people that I'm friends with advocate for a secular government, they advocate for humanism. They're philosophically, we're not that much different.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and that's fine. But if you're
Yeah.
trying to push in, you know, anti-blasphemy legislation through, then yeah, we're gonna have a problem. We're gonna have a fundamental disagreement. But
Right.
for the most part, at least people that I've encountered, and I live in the deep South, so I encounter plenty of racist asshole Christians. But
Right.
but they're not racist assholes because they're Christians.
They're just racist assholes and Christians.
They're just racist, and perhaps the religion helps fuel some of that. But these are people that if they deconverted tomorrow would still hold, they'd be Stefan Molyneux and things like that. Like, they would.
Right.
These beliefs are not something that you overcome easily. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So, what you said you're gonna be having content soon. Are you what is your main goal for your channel as of now? What would you like to accomplish with your channel?
So the initial videos and sort of the direction that I'm going to attempt to take my channel is going to be things that I dealt with whenever I was deconverting. So, and I touched on this earlier that, the
Mm-hmm.
atheist community does, the challenges with atheism, the embracement, the proclivity to embrace nihilism and the meaninglessness and the things that you can go across. So a lot of my original content is going to be like advice or things that helped me, from my personal experience, advice for the newly deconverted,
Mm-hmm.
especially those that came out of a theistic tradition, because it's a fundamental shift. You go from believing that there is an all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful being that has a plan for your life, to I am a speck of dirt floating around on another speck of dirt, in a speck of dirt galaxy in the vastness of the cosmos. And
Right.
so, originally my content, I'll be doing a series of videos that are help for the newly deconverted, and things that helped me uh, along my road to sort of being comfortable with atheism, because initially it wasn't a comfortable place for me. And now I'm much happier. My relationship with my family's better, with my wife. Uh, at this point in time, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Mhm.
But whenever I was deconverting, and it may be just because my Google flu's not good, the atheist community does a real job of like getting you to atheism. Like the arguments are fairly rock solid, and but then once you get there, it's kind of like, oh, well, you generate meaning for yourself, and atheism doesn't actually equate to nihilism. Here you go.
Right.
And so initially my channel is going to be focused on sort of philosophical concepts that helped me, and ways that I call it, for lack of a better term, an operating system for life. Going from a sort of a theistic operating system to a secular operating system, and things like embracing things like humanism, and philosophy, and ways to view the world that are less problematic than you
Mhm.
may run into. And then I plan on doing interviews with both atheists and theists.
Mhm.
And I'll probably dabble in the classic sort of debunking religious arguments, particularly philosophical ones. I enjoy science, but and I enjoy philosophy. And on both ends of the spectrum, there are people that are way smarter than me already producing content for that. So,
Right. So, what now? When you and your were you still religious when you and your wives were first started courting, and well, that's old school sounding, isn't it? When you guys first started dating, were you guys both still religious?
so it's an interesting. I I guess you'd say that my faith started to shake whenever I was about um 16,
Uh huh.
and then I went through kind of a patchy period of my life. Um, I guess you could say personal hell or whatever.
Mm,
And then I actually turned back to Christianity about the time that me and my wife met each other. Um, and so she was a Christian. I was playing it Christian because it was something that was familiar, and I needed to get my feet back underneath me. And I had
right.
gotten relatively stable whenever I met her. But to answer your question in straight terms, yes, we were both theists. I'd sort of returned to, I guess, easy believism Christianity, and
Mhm.
she was raised in a religious household, not quite as fundamentalist as I was,
Right.
but we were both theists, and
So
we were married in a church, and we continued to be theists for a good chunk of um,
married life.
our married life. And
Okay.
then because I came out in as an openly atheist in November of last year, and I would consider myself probably an atheist for about a year previous to that. And her and I had discussions on religion and beliefs and things like that. So, but as I've said many times before, she's a little more clear headed than I am. So whenever things started, the house of cards started crumbling around sort of a vague sort of pantheism, deism
Right.
view things. She just went straight to it. It took me a meandering path to get there. So
Oh wow. So I was going to ask you if you guys went on your journey together, but it sounds like she was more converted faster than you were then, huh?
yeah, I mean, like I say, she's much clearer thinking than I am, uh, just by nature. Which thank goodness for that, because she's an awesome lady. But yeah, she probably, I would say that she deconverted quicker and easier than I did.
Right.
But we went through the sort of the process together, I guess you could say.
That's cool. That's cool. Now, I didn't, I forgot to ask this part, but what branch of Pentecostalism were you? Where there's oneness, there's Trinitarianism, there's charismatics, there evangelicals. What would you call the branch you were in?
It was Church of God, but they're pretty varied. So I would say it's more in the line of sort of charismatic evangelical um Pentecostalism. And it was
And
kind of, I mean, it was a unique.
were they the hardcore women don't cut their hair, always wear skirts, men must have short hair, no facial hair, that kind of thing?
No, they were that was kind of socially implied. It wasn't like in the edicts of the church. And
Right.
they were fairly laid back. It was still women dressed modestly and, you know, uh, but they were the kind that like we had an altar call every service and there was people speaking in tongues and people translating and, people falling out and stuff like that. And that's like all stuff that I did growing up.
Right.
Like, you know, and which is funny because at that point in time that was the way that God interacted with his people, was speaking in tongues and being blessed by the Holy Spirit and being slain in the Spirit and things like that. And there are whole denominations of Christians that think that that's just woo. That's just
It's,
ridiculous. God,
it's
God doesn't
pretty
do that.
it's pretty silly. I remember the first time I ever went to a Pentecostal service, and I was blown away. But I was freshly in love, and I'm like, okay, I'll go anywhere with you. I don't care. But like when people started doing all that speaking in tongues, and they did the altar call, and like like people are falling out and shit. I'm like, holy shit, the fuck's going on with these? I'm like, what the hell's going? I'd heard them do the speaking in tongues, like her dad's a pastor, like I said, so he does the like
Oh yeah.
bala, and like I'm like, and I wondered sometimes, and I always had the idea. I'm like, he's absolutely faking, when he's in the middle of his preaching, but the faking thing, I'm not really. I think they really think something's going on because my ex Heather, she's not a liar by any means. She's a straight shooter, and I really think that she is having something going on when she goes into speaking in tongues. I don't think she's talking to God, but there's definitely something going on there. I mean, I don't know if it's like a mass. If you work yourself up into like a mass hysteria kind of thing, I'm not sure what it is, but there's definitely something going on there.
No, absolutely. Because, at no point in time would I call because I've spoken in tongues and I've been slain in the Spirit and I've experienced the euphoria of God, at the time, what I believed was God descending on a group of people. Praise and
Mhm.
worship's going, and the Pentecostal speakers, especially, they infer things in a certain cadence that really kind of wraps you up, and whenever the music is going and things are, I equate it to if you've ever done drugs and been to a good concert.
Mhm.
You kind of what that feels like
No,
that unity with the crowd and being in the
yeah,
mosh pit and moving with the people and things. It's a very similar experience, and I wouldn't call it insincere, and I wouldn't call that anybody that I went to church with was faking what they felt. I think that it's a misattribution of what they felt. But,
right, right,
I would never devalue my experiences, because there's
right,
still, even though I realize what was going on, those are still experiences that I hold near and dear to my existence. And so, and people just like, oh, I wouldn't admit that I spoke in tongues and think like that's a different person, you know. And
right.
so, uh, I mean, it's very real. It feels real.
I know what you
I
mean. I know
honestly
what you
believe
mean.
at that point in time that I was in the same headspace as the disciples and the people who were gathered, in the upper room whenever the Holy Spirit originally fell after Jesus's death. That
Oh,
was,
you talk about Acts, that
yeah,
part in Acts. Okay,
yeah. I mean, that was repeatedly taught in the church and things like that. So, whenever I'd read about it in the Bible, like, the blessings of the Spirit, and they spoke in the tongues of men and angels, and and the whole shooting match. Like whenever you're wrapped up in it and you really believe, uh it's as real gets. It's
Mhm.
just as real as going to a concert,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
having a especially touching moment with an intimate partner, or things like that. Like these are all experiences that we can experience.
Relate
But the
to.
problem
Yeah,
is, those experiences happen universally. They're not, they happen in most major religions, and they happen outside of religion, like
right.
concerts, and like, even you can get, and especially if you're prone to sort of mystical experiences, which I am, I can get wrapped up in a really good piece of music and get, a sense of euphoria from it, that
Mhm.
is seemingly non-physical, but now
Right.
that's just the way that we're wired, especially people who are prone to those sorts of experiences. And there's
Mhm.
nothing that necessitates it being supernatural. And so
Right.
why attribute a supernatural cause to it? Why not
Right.
just respect the experience for what it is?
Right, exactly. And the funny thing is even as a non-religious person, when I went to her with like services, especially like the bigger ones, you know how the like local Pentecostals. I don't know if you guys did this too, but like where Pentecostals from all over the state would come for like a
Yeah,
conference, and then did you guys do the same thing?
we did the
Well,
same
I went
thing.
I went to one of them once, right? And I'm an unbeliever, but I could feel the power in the room and the camaraderie. And now I didn't equate it with God. Um, all them people together in that room, I don't doubt what they felt was very, very real.
Yeah,
I mean, the euphoria and the crying and the just that sense um of what's the word I'm looking for? It's well-being, but I was gonna say that feeling of acceptance of you're with your own people
yeah,
is is no less real than me going to a Volbeat concert or one of my favorite bands or whatever. That doesn't I mean that opened my eyes to see that, hey, these people really truly believe this. I used to think it was all just fake, but uh I mean, I can't but like you said, I can't take away that experience from them because to them it's very real. It is very real. I don't think they're faking. I used to think it was all just faking. I'm not
yep,
saying there's no fake tongue speaking going on. Like when the preacher's up there, I don't think he's going into a trance or
yeah,
speaking in tongues, but for the regular parishioners, I believe wholeheartedly that they are having some kind of experience. But
yeah, absolutely. And I think it lends, because I can remember, because we did, there was this giant revival going on in Brownsville, Florida. And I remember going to it several times with my family, and we'd go down there. It wasn't too far away from the house, and there'd be, gosh, I can't remember how many that church could seat, something like 1,000. And they had an
mhm,
awesome band. I mean, people with real talent.
yeah,
Uh, and they would get the music going, and people would get moving and jiving and speaking in tongues and things like that. And I remember one particular instance whenever the preacher was going down through the aisles and he was touching people with the Bible, and of course they were being slain in the spirit just left and right. And I can remember, even, I was young at that point in time, maybe
mhm,
14, something like that. And I can remember sitting there thinking, please come our way. If I could just, if he would just touch me with his Bible, if he could transfer some of that power, if he could, if I could just do that. And he did, and I fell out, and it was a blissful state of euphoria and things like that. And like looking back on it, I realized, what was going on behind the scenes there, so to speak. But you can imagine somebody in first century Jerusalem that's, say, listening to this really charismatic dude named Jesus, and things are getting whipped up and things like that. Like you can imagine the headspace that you would be in if we didn't understand the things about the world that we did. And so, like, there's no doubt in my mind that these people were utterly convinced of what
Right.
was going on. But, you know, the question is, was it really God, or was it more,
A mass
I want to,
euphoria kind of
yeah, like a
thing.
mass
Mass
euphoria or something like
euphoria.
that. Like
Yeah.
whenever the Holy Spirit descended upon the gathered people in the upper room, you know, was that actually the Holy Spirit descending, or was it something else that we can that was you could view through, like a mass hysteria or something like that, you know? And I think that whenever you examine the evidence and what's going on, and especially the proclivity for it to happen in and outside of religious experiences and in and outside of different religions, then the answer, of course, is, well, that's natural. That's something that our brain can do for us, you know, because you
Mm.
can induce this reliably. Uh, but I totally understand why somebody in first century Jerusalem would think,
Right.
absolutely, this is the fucking creator of the universe, man. There's no question in my mind.
Yeah, because
So,
they get whipped up into a frenzy. I mean, that's just like voodoo practitioners.
yeah,
I don't think they're possessed by like whatever, like Bala, the king god of voodoo. But I mean, to them, something is most certainly going on. I mean, they're having some kind. It's not a. I wouldn't call it a religious experience, but let's call it. Or what do we call it? You just like
yeah, yeah,
a
mass
mass
euphoria,
mass
or, you know,
euphoria.
I'm sure there's probably more learned words for it. It's not, you're not really experiencing the presence of God. That doesn't
Exactly. Yeah.
make the experience any less real to the person. And
Right.
so, you know,
Right.
and perhaps I'm more sympathetic to that because I've experienced so much of it in my life. But, you know, and I've experienced it in and outside of Christianity. So it's not like, you know, again, it's one of those things. It's very real in the sense that it happens and that you can be sincere about it. But are you really communicating with the creator of the universe? And the answer is, in my mind, unequivocally no. You know, so but I understand why people think so. So
Right. I get where they get confused. I get it. Um. So this weekend, is that what you're shooting for? Your first content to come out, or soon?
I'm hoping this weekend. I've still got some groundwork to do for the channel.
Uh
Um,
huh.
at the very latest, I plan on. I've already got some stuff shot and got sort of some stuff laid out, but hopefully this weekend I'll produce my first video. If not, it'll be next weekend. So
And are you going to stick to strictly atheism stuff, or are you going to do any woo debunking too, like flat Earth and like just woo stuff like that, crystals and
so
Breatharianism,
I'm gonna
anti-vaxxers?
I'm definitely gonna branch out into uh broader than simply atheism. Um, Probably won't touch the flat earth thing, but I'm going to try to keep it to things that are associated with religion. And that's basically where I'm going to bound my channel at. So I'm going to go into, you know, I plan on going into like religious political policies
Oh,
and religious
cool.
woo and things like that. But I'm going to try to keep it within the bounds of um, things that are. And one thing that I would like to do is, and I have no clue how I'm actually going to do it, is start to work on the positives of religion, the sense of community and the sense of camaraderie and the, you know, binding moral prerogatives and things like that, and try to extrapolate the things that are good about religion and hopefully work them into a sort of secular atheist or secular humanistic framework. Maybe not necessarily atheistic, but at the very least secular. Um, you know, so that's going to be. It's not going to be strictly atheism, but it's going to be things that deal with secular issues, with religion, and stuff like that. I'm going to try to keep it somewhat in the lines where it's not just all over the place.
Right. That's awesome. I look forward to your stuff coming out, and I really do look forward to it. I enjoy um okay, I guess one of my last questions would be what made you want to start a YouTube channel? I mean, like,
So
who is there any one influence you can think of that made you want to do it?
so Neil actually, my wife has for years has encouraged me to do public speaking and sort of converse with more people about these subjects. Even whenever I was a theist, because my spirituality was very private, and she always encouraged me to be more public with it. Uh, and luckily, she likes listening to me talk for whatever reason. So she's always encouraged me. She's said multiple times over the years, "You should start a YouTube channel where you just talk and things like that." And I've always kind of brushed it off. And then whenever I did my interview with Neil, whenever we got done with it, he was like, "Man, you should start a YouTube channel." And then several other people in Neil's little posse encouraged me to do it. And so that finally, like, there for the long, whenever my wife was telling me, I'm like, you're just, you're partial, you're biased. But whenever other people started chiming in, like, hey, I would actually watch your videos if you made them, then I started thinking, well, hey, maybe I could give something back to the community. And so that's what got me thinking about, like, what niche is not being filled right now, and help for, and of course Frustrated Atheist has science for the recently deconverted and things like that, but especially
Right.
the life operating system questions that I really struggled with. I think there's a need there, and so I'm going to attempt in whatever capacity that I possibly can to fill it, at least with my own experiences.
Yeah,
So you can blame Neil is basically what it boils down to.
I would never blame Neil for that. I look forward to you starting a channel. All right, well, we're at right about an hour. Does anybody want to? I asked everybody in the okay. Avatar wants a link for an after show. Staggerson, would you like one? There's only a few people watching now, but I'll tell you what. I'll just put it in the coffee stream and the usual suspects, and I'm sure someone will hop in. So I
Absolutely.
want to thank you for coming on. I'm still looking forward to Sunday. I really was looking forward to that, and then that day just ended up being well. You slept in all day, and I ended up going and shoveling 3 hours of snow, and after that, I didn't have the energy to do shit. So, but so Sunday we're still set up for our normal Sunday stream. That's awesome. Like I said, though, I'd like to thank you for coming, and if you
Absolutely.
guys
Thanks for
aren't
having me.
oh, anytime, buddy. You know that. And if you guys aren't following Evans on Twitter, I believe it's the Faithless Southerner, or you
It's
can find him on
it's at
Evans Murphy.
Faithless South, yeah,
Yeah,
or
and
Evans
yeah,
Murphy.
and you can find him in Evans Murphy. So if you're not, please do that. And you have your channel set up now, right? So if they
Yeah,
wanted to sub, they could.
yeah. I just dropped
Awesome.
a thing in chat. It's easier to find me that way. So just click on my name and go to channel. I've already got 12 subscribers, so I'm ahead of the game.
Awesome. I'm pretty sure I'm subbed to you, but let's go look real quick.
I
And
think so.
I'm pretty sure I am, but let me double check. And if I'm not, I'll sub to you right now.
Oh, there's
Excuse me.
Stags. Picked
Huh?
up one. Excellent. I'm up to 13 now. Rolling.
Oh yeah, I'm subscribed. So woohoo! Lucky number 13, Stags. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop out. I'm gonna go ahead and shut there down then, and I'm gonna get an after show set up, and I'll see you all in a few. Thanks for coming on, brother.